I still don't know what version of that night he tells himself when he's trying to fall asleep. I've replayed it so many times in my head that the details blur, but the feeling, God, the feeling is still sharp enough to cut me open if I let it. It started months before anything actually happened, back when I still believed my husband was just going through one of those restless phases people joke about in their 30s. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Denver, the kind where every house looks like a slightly altered copy of the next. Two-car garage, trimmed lawns, neighbors who waved but didn't really know you. We had a routine that used to feel safe. Weekdays were work and takeout or quick dinners. Weekends were errands, Netflix, sometimes a brewery with friends. His friends. That's where everything started to shift, though I didn't see it clearly at first. Ethan had always been social, more outgoing than me. He had this tight-knit group of guys he'd known since college: Ryan, Cole, Marcus, and Nate. They were loud, confident, the kind of men who took up space in a room without trying. I used to like being around them in small doses. They made things feel lively, like I was stepping into a different version of my life for a few hours. But sometime around our 4th year of marriage, Ethan started insisting we see them more often. Not just occasional hangouts, he wanted them over constantly. Friday nights turned into late nights with too much drinking. Saturdays blurred into backyard barbecues that stretched until well past midnight. Even weeknights weren't safe anymore. At first, I thought he was just bored. Maybe he missed that younger version of himself, the one who didn't have responsibilities beyond showing up and having a good time. I tried to be supportive. I laughed when I didn't feel like laughing. I poured drinks, made snacks, played along. But something about the way he watched me started to feel off. It wasn't jealousy. If anything, it was the opposite. There were moments I'd catch him looking at me while I was talking to one of his friends, and there was this strange intensity in his eyes. Not protective, not possessive. Something else. Something that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't quite explain. I remember one night in particular. We were all sitting around the fire pit in our backyard. It was late enough that the air had turned cold, but nobody wanted to go inside. I had a blanket wrapped around me, sitting between Ryan and Marcus. We were laughing about something stupid, and Ryan made one of his usual borderline comments. Nothing outright disrespectful, but just enough to make me shift uncomfortably. Before I could even react, I glanced at Ethan, expecting him to shut it down like he used to. He didn't. He just sat there, sipping his drink, watching me. There was a small smile on his face. Not amused, not annoyed, just interested. That was the first time I felt it. That quiet, creeping unease. Later that night, after everyone left, I brought it up while we were cleaning up empty bottles. "Ryan's comments are getting kind of weird," I said, trying to sound casual. Ethan shrugged like it was nothing. "That's just how he is." "I know, but it used to bother you." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and there was something different in his expression. "Does it bother you?" "Yeah," I admitted. "A little." He paused for a second, like he was thinking something through, then gave me this half smile. "I think you're overthinking it." That should have been the end of it. I should have pushed harder, trusted my instincts, drawn a line. But I didn't. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. That became a pattern. The comments got bolder over time. Not aggressive, not crossing any obvious lines, but enough to make me aware of how I was being looked at. And every time it happened, Ethan did nothing. Sometimes he even laughed. One night, after a few drinks, Cole said something about how I was too good for Ethan, and instead of brushing it off, Ethan leaned back in his chair and said, "You have no idea." Everyone laughed, including me, but I remember feeling this weird flush of heat in my chest. It wasn't flattery. It felt like I was being offered up, somehow, like I was part of the joke. Things started changing between Ethan and me too. Not in the obvious ways. We still slept in the same bed, still had sex, still went through the motions of a normal marriage. But emotionally, it felt like he was drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. He became more observant, more focused on me in this unsettling way. He'd suggest outfits when his friends were coming over. "Wear that black dress," he'd say casually. Or, "You look really good in those jeans. You should put those on tonight." At first, I thought he was just trying to be sweet, complimenting me. But it didn't feel like it was for me. It felt like it was for them. I started noticing the way his friends looked at me more too, like they had permission they didn't used to have, like there was something unspoken happening that I wasn't fully aware of. And the worst part? A small, quiet part of me didn't hate it. I hate admitting that even now, but it's the truth. There was something about being seen like that, about the attention, the tension in the room when I walked in. It made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Desired, not just as someone's wife, but as me. That feeling came with guilt, though, a lot of it. I tried to push it down. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing was actually happening, until the night everything shifted from unspoken to undeniable. It was a Saturday, one of those long, drawn-out nights where everyone had already been drinking for hours before the sun even set. The house felt louder than usual, more chaotic. Music playing too loud, voices overlapping, laughter that felt just a little too sharp. I remember standing in the kitchen, pouring myself another drink, when Ethan came up behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. For a second, it felt normal, familiar. Then he leaned in close and said, very quietly, "You know they all want you, right?" I froze. I thought I'd misheard him. What? He didn't move away. Ryan, Cole, Marcus, hell, even Nate, they all look at you like that. I felt my heart start to pound. "Ethan, what are you—" "I see it," he interrupted, his voice calm, almost curious. "And you see it too." I turned around to face him, searching his expression for some kind of joke, some sign that he didn't mean what he was saying. There was none. "Why are you saying this?" I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. He shrugged slightly, like it wasn't a big deal. "Just stating a fact." "That's not normal." He tilted his head, studying me. "Why not?" I didn't have an answer ready for that. I just knew it felt wrong. "Because they're your friends, and I'm your wife." "And?" he said. That one word hit harder than anything else he'd said. And. Like those things didn't matter. Like the lines I thought existed were just optional. I should have walked away right then. I should have shut it down, demanded answers, something. But I didn't. Because in that moment, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not jealousy. Permission. And that scared me more than anything. I pulled away from him, setting my drink down on the counter with shaky hands. I don't like this conversation. He didn't stop me. He didn't apologize. He just watched me walk out of the kitchen like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. I went back into the living room, trying to act normal, but everything felt different. The way his friends looked at me now felt heavier, more deliberate, like something had shifted that I couldn't undo. Ryan caught my eye and smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. Not friendly, not casual, knowing. I realized then that whatever Ethan had just said to me, it wasn't new. It had been building for a while, and I was the last one to fully understand what was happening. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I laid there next to Ethan, staring at the ceiling while his breathing settled into that slow, steady rhythm that meant he was completely at ease, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just said something that rewired the way I saw everything around me. My mind kept replaying it. "You know they all want you, right?" The way he said it, calm, almost fascinated, made my skin feel too tight. And the worst part wasn't just that he noticed it, it was that he liked it. I turned my head slightly and looked at him in the dark. His face was relaxed, peaceful, like the man I married was still there somewhere under whatever this was becoming. I wanted to shake him awake and demand an explanation. I wanted to hear him say it was a joke, that I misunderstood, that everything was still normal. But I already knew I wouldn't get that, because deep down, I'd felt this coming long before he ever said it out loud. The next few days were strange. Ethan acted completely normal. He went to work, texted me about groceries, asked what I wanted for dinner. If anything, he seemed lighter, like he'd unburdened himself somehow, like saying it out loud had made something easier for him. I, on the other hand, felt like I was walking around with a secret I didn't ask for. I kept thinking about confronting him again, but every time I tried to bring it up in my head, I didn't even know where to start. What do you say to your husband after he casually admits he's aware his friends are looking at you like that and doesn't care? Or worse, encourages it. So I avoided it, which, looking back, was the exact moment everything slipped out of my control. Because avoiding it didn't make it go away, it just gave it space to grow. The next weekend, he invited them over again. I almost said no. I had the words ready. I was going to tell him I wasn't feeling up for it, that I wanted a quiet night, just us, something normal. But when he asked, there was this look in his eyes again, that same quiet anticipation. And I hesitated. "Yeah," I heard myself say. "That's fine." I hated how easy it was for me to fall into that. By the time they showed up, I'd already had a glass of wine just to take the edge off. I told myself it was just to relax, to not overthink things, but the truth was, I didn't trust myself to face them completely sober. The energy felt different from the moment they walked in. It wasn't obvious. No one said anything out of line right away. There were no big, dramatic moments, but underneath the surface, there was this tension, like everyone was aware of something unspoken. Or maybe it was just me. Ryan hugged me a little longer than usual when he greeted me. His hand rested on my lower back for a second too long before he pulled away. Cole made a comment about how I looked dangerous tonight, and instead of brushing it off, Ethan just smirked. That smirk, I caught it out of the corner of my eye, and it sent a chill down my spine. As the night went on, the drinks flowed like they always did. Music got louder, conversations blurred together. I tried to stay grounded, tried to keep things normal, but it felt like I was constantly being watched. Not in a creepy way, in a focused way, like I was the center of something I didn't fully understand. At one point, I ended up on the couch between Marcus and Nate. Ethan was across the room, talking to Cole, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't even have to look to know. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that it felt almost private despite the noise around us. "You okay?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I turned to look at him.
"Yeah? Why?" He shrugged, but there was something in his expression. "You just seem different tonight." I forced a small smile. Just tired, I guess. He studied me for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. But he didn't move away. If anything, he shifted just a little closer. Close enough that I was aware of the heat of his arm next to mine. I should have moved. I didn't. That same quiet, dangerous curiosity was still there, sitting in the back of my mind, the one I kept trying to ignore. And Ethan was watching. I finally glanced over at him, unable to resist. Our eyes met across the room, and for a split second, everything else faded out. He didn't look angry. He didn't look jealous. He looked locked in, like he was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But that look made something inside me shift. It made this feel less like something happening around me and more like something I was being pulled into. I broke eye contact first, my heart beating faster than it should have been. I stood up abruptly, muttering something about getting another drink. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, trying to steady myself. What was I doing? What was any of this? I poured another drink, even though I knew I didn't need it. My hands were slightly shaky, and I hated how out of control I felt. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it wasn't Ethan. "Running away?" Ryan's voice was low, almost teasing. I exhaled slowly before turning to face him. Just needed a second. He leaned against the counter, way too comfortable in my space. "From what?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know how to put it into words. "From you? From him? From whatever this is." Instead, I shrugged. "It's loud out there." He smiled, but it wasn't casual. "You don't seem like someone who gets overwhelmed easily." "You don't know me that well," I said. "Maybe I want to." That should have been my cue to shut it down, hard. But instead, I just stood there, holding his gaze, feeling that same pull I'd been fighting all night. Because he wasn't wrong. There was a part of me that wanted to see how far this could go, and that terrified me. "Ryan," I started, my voice quieter now, "you're Ethan's friend." "I know," he said, not missing a beat. "And I'm his wife." "I know that too." There was no hesitation in his voice, no guilt, just certainty. "Does that not matter to you?" I asked. He stepped a little closer, his expression unreadable now. "Does it matter to him?" That question hit like a punch to the chest, because I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to say it out loud. Before I could respond, we both heard movement behind us. I turned instinctively. Ethan was standing in the doorway, watching us. For a second, everything froze. This was the moment, I thought. This was where he'd step in, where he'd put a stop to it, where everything would snap back into place. But he didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, observing. And then he smiled. Not a big smile, not exaggerated, just enough. Enough to tell me everything I needed to know.
My chest tightened, something between anger and disbelief rising up so fast it made me dizzy. "You're just going to stand there?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Ryan stepped back slightly, but Ethan didn't. "Do you want me to?" he asked calmly. That question, it broke something, because it wasn't a defense, it wasn't denial, it was an invitation. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't something that was happening by accident. This wasn't just careless behavior or blurred lines. This was intentional. Whatever this was, he wanted it. And somehow, without realizing it, I'd been stepping closer to it all along. I looked between them, Ryan standing too close, Ethan watching like it was all unfolding exactly how he expected, and I felt something inside me snap into clarity. I wasn't just caught in the middle of this. I was part of it, and I didn't know how to stop anymore. I didn't say anything after that. I just stood there in the kitchen, looking at both of them, feeling like the ground under me had shifted into something unstable and unfamiliar. Ryan was close enough that I could feel his presence like heat against my skin, and Ethan, my husband, was standing there like he was watching a scene play out that he'd already seen in his head 100 times, waiting. That was the part that stuck with me. He wasn't reacting. He was waiting. For what? I finally asked, my voice quieter now, but sharper underneath. Ethan tilted his head slightly like he was studying me. For you to decide. My stomach dropped. Decide what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes flicked briefly toward Ryan, then back to me, like he didn't even need to explain it out loud. And that silence said more than anything he could have said. I felt this sudden rush of anger, hot and overwhelming, cutting through the confusion that had been clouding my head all night. "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. "You think this is, what, some kind of game?" Ryan shifted beside me, like he wasn't sure if he should stay or leave, but Ethan didn't move at all. "It's not a game," he said calmly. "Then what is it?" My voice cracked a little, and I hated that it did, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just letting your friend hit on your wife while you stand there and, what, enjoy it? There it was, out in the open. For a second, the room felt too small, too tight, like there wasn't enough air. Ethan exhaled slowly, like he'd been expecting this reaction. "I'm not letting anything happen," he said. "You're a grown woman. You can make your own choices." "That's not the point," I shot back. "Then what is the point?" he asked, his voice still steady, still frustratingly calm. "That I'm supposed to step in and control the situation? Control you?"
That's not what I said, isn't it? His words hit in a way that made me pause, just for a second. Because no, that's not what I meant. But it also wasn't what this was. This wasn't about control. This wasn't about independence or freedom or whatever he was trying to twist it into. This was about him standing there and watching something happen that shouldn't be happening at all. "You're my husband," I said, quieter now, but more intense. "You're supposed to care." "I do care," he said. "Then act like it." Something flickered in his expression then. Not anger, not defensiveness, something closer to frustration. "I am," he said. That didn't make any sense. "How is this caring?" I demanded, gesturing between me and Ryan. Ethan pushed himself off the doorframe and took a few steps closer, his eyes locked on mine now. "Because I'm being honest," he said, "with you, with myself." "About what?" "About the fact that this," he gestured vaguely toward the living room, toward the noise, the laughter, the energy that suddenly felt miles away, "isn't a surprise to me, and it's not a surprise to you either." I shook my head immediately. "No, don't do that. Don't try to make this something I'm part of. You are part of it," he said, not raising his voice, but not backing down either. My chest tightened again, that uncomfortable truth pressing in from all sides, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had noticed it, I had felt it, and I hadn't stopped it. But acknowledging that felt dangerous, like stepping over a line I couldn't come back from. "That doesn't mean I want this," I said quickly. Ethan held my gaze for a long moment. "Are you sure?" The question landed heavy, too heavy, because I didn't answer right away. And that silence, it said more than I wanted it to. Ryan shifted again beside me, running a hand through his hair, clearly aware he was standing in the middle of something bigger than just him. "Maybe I should stay," Ethan said, cutting him off without even looking at him. That word sent a chill straight down my spine. Stay. Like this was intentional, controlled, planned. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice softer now, but filled with something deeper. "Seriously, I need you to explain this to me because I don't understand."
For the first time, Ethan hesitated. Not long, just enough to make it noticeable. Then he sighed, running a hand over the back of his neck. Because I've been thinking about it for a while. My stomach twisted. Thinking about what? About how things feel different now, he said. Between us, in general. I blinked at him. Different how? He shrugged slightly. Less intense. Less exciting. That stung more than I expected. So your solution is this? I asked, my voice tight. It's not a solution, he said quickly. It's just something I've been curious about. Curious. That word made something inside me recoil. This isn't some experiment, Ethan. This is our marriage. I know that.
Then act like it matters. It does matter, he insisted. That's why I'm not hiding anything. That's why I'm not pretending I don't see what's already there. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. So instead of shutting it down, you just lean into it? I'm not forcing anything, he said again. I'm just not stopping it either. The room felt unbearably quiet for a second, even with the noise from the other side of the house. Because what he was saying, it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And that made it so much worse. I looked at Ryan then, really looked at him, like I was seeing him clearly for the first time in this context. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look conflicted. He looked like he was waiting too, waiting for me. That realization made my heart start racing again, faster this time, because suddenly everything felt like it was narrowing down to a single moment, a decision, and I hated that. I don't like this, I said, more to myself than to either of them. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Ethan said. But there was something about the way he said it that didn't feel reassuring. It felt like a challenge, like he didn't actually believe I'd walk away. And maybe part of him didn't want me to. I grabbed my drink off the counter, more for something to do with my hands than anything else. My thoughts were spinning, pulling me in opposite directions. This was wrong, all of it. The situation, the tension, the way it was making me feel. But underneath that, buried deeper than I wanted to admit, there was something else. That same pull, that same curiosity. And the fact that Ethan wasn't stopping it, that he was watching, allowing it, even encouraging it in his own quiet way, it blurred the lines in a way that made it harder to hold on to what I knew was right. I need air, I said suddenly, setting the glass down again. Neither of them stopped me this time. I walked past Ethan, brushing his shoulder just slightly as I went, and headed toward the back door. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. Outside, the night air hit me like a shock. Cold, sharp, real. I stepped onto the patio, gripping the railing as I tried to steady my breathing. What the hell was happening to me? To us? This wasn't who we were. Or maybe it was, and I just hadn't seen it until now. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to clear my head, but all I could see was Ethan's expression, that calm, watching look, and Ryan, standing there, waiting. I exhaled slowly, opening my eyes again, and that's when I heard the door behind me open. I didn't turn around right away, but I already knew. This wasn't over, not even close. The door creaked softly behind me, and I felt it before I heard it fully close. That shift in the air, that subtle awareness of someone stepping into my space. I didn't turn around right away.
I just kept my hands wrapped around the cold metal railing, staring out into the dark backyard, like it could somehow ground me. You always come out here when you're overwhelmed? Ryan's voice. Of course it was him. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders tightening slightly. I didn't realize I had a pattern. You don't, he said, stepping a little closer. But you look like you needed to get away. I gave a small, humorless laugh. That obvious? Yeah, he said simply. There was a pause after that, not awkward, but heavy, filled with everything that had just happened inside. I finally turned around. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching me in that same focused way he had all night. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. Did he send you out here? I asked. Ryan shook his head. No. I studied his face, trying to read him, trying to figure out where he stood in all of this. Then why are you out here? He hesitated just for a second, then said, because you walked out. That answer shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because it wasn't about Ethan. It wasn't about the situation inside. It was about me, and that made everything feel more personal, more real. I looked away from him, back out into the yard. This is messed up, you know that, right? Yeah, he said. I blinked, surprised by how quickly he agreed.
That's it? Just yeah? He shrugged slightly. You want me to pretend it's not? I want you to act like it matters, I said, my voice tightening again. It does matter. Then why are you out here? That question hung between us, because there were 100 different answers he could have given, that the truth was already obvious. He took another step closer, not enough to crowd me, but enough to make the distance between us feel smaller. Because I'm not going to lie and say I haven't thought about it. My stomach dropped slightly. Thought about what? I asked, even though I already knew. You, he said, his voice steady. There it was, out in the open. No jokes, no deflection, no pretending, just the truth. I felt that familiar mix of emotions rise up again. Discomfort, anger, curiosity, something deeper I didn't want to name. You shouldn't, I said, but the words didn't come out as strong as I wanted them to. Probably not, he admitted, but you still do. Yeah. There was no hesitation in his voice, no apology. And for some reason, that honesty made it harder to push him away. Because he wasn't pretending this was okay. He was just not stopping. I shook my head, more to myself than to him. This isn't who I am. I'm not saying it is, he replied. Then what are you saying? He paused for a second, like he was choosing his words carefully. I'm saying that things don't always stay as simple as we think they are. I let out a quiet breath, feeling the weight of that, because he wasn't entirely wrong. Things hadn't been simple for a while.
Not between me and Ethan, not in the way I felt about myself lately. But that didn't justify this. It didn't make it okay. I'm married, I said again, more firmly this time. To your friend. I know. And he's inside right now. I know that too. Then why does it feel like none of that matters to either of you? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. Ryan didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to figure something out. Maybe it does matter, he said finally, just not in the way you expect. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe not, he admitted, but neither does what's happening in there. He had a point. That was the problem. Nothing about this made sense anymore. The rules I thought I understood, the boundaries I thought were solid, they all felt blurred now, like they didn't carry the same weight they used to. And Ethan, he wasn't pulling things back into place. He was letting them drift further. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling colder than before. I don't like how this feels. Ryan's expression softened slightly. Then say the word, and I'll walk back inside. No questions asked. That should have been easy. It should have been immediate. Say it. Tell him to leave. End it. But I didn't. Because standing there, with the cool air around me and the noise of the party muffled behind the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Wanted. Not just in the casual, comfortable way that comes with a long-term relationship, but in a sharp, undeniable way that made my pulse quicken, and I hated that I liked it. I looked at him again, searching for something. Maybe doubt, maybe hesitation, something that would make this easier to shut down. But all I saw was patience. He wasn't pushing, he wasn't rushing. He was just there, waiting, just like Ethan had been. That realization sent another wave of unease through me. They weren't the same, not at all, but in this moment, they were connected by something I didn't fully understand, something that centered around me, and that scared me more than anything. Why is he okay with this? I asked suddenly, my voice quieter now. Ryan's gaze shifted slightly, like he'd been expecting that question. You should ask him. I did, I said. He didn't give me a real answer. Ryan exhaled slowly. Then maybe he doesn't fully understand it either. That's not good enough, I said. I know. Silence fell between us again, but it felt different this time. Heavier. Closer. I became aware of how little space there was between us now. At some point, without even realizing it, we'd moved closer. Close enough that I could see the small details in his face, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes didn't leave mine. My heart was beating faster again. Too fast. This is a mistake, I said softly. Maybe, he replied, but you're still here. So are you. That hit harder than it should have, because it was true. I hadn't walked away. I hadn't gone back inside to my husband, demanded answers, ended the night. I'd stayed, out here, with him. And that choice, even if I hadn't fully acknowledged it until now, it meant something. I swallowed,
my throat suddenly dry. If we cross a line, there's no going back. I know. And you're okay with that? Ryan didn't answer right away. For the first time since he'd come outside, there was a flicker of something uncertain in his expression. Not fear, not regret, just awareness. I think that line's already been crossed, he said quietly. I felt that in my chest, because he wasn't talking about anything physical. He was talking about everything that had led up to this moment. The looks, the conversations. Ethan standing in that doorway, watching instead of stopping it. Me not stopping it either. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just one bad decision waiting to happen. This was a series of choices, and I was standing right in the middle of them. When I opened my eyes again, he was still there, still waiting. The air between us felt charged now, like something inevitable was building. And somewhere deep down, I knew the next thing that happened was going to change everything. I wish I could tell you that I walked away, that something in me snapped back into place at the last second, that I remembered who I was supposed to be and chose that instead of whatever this was becoming. But that's not what happened. What happened was quieter than that, slower. The kind of moment that doesn't feel like a decision while it's happening, that ends up being the one that changes everything. I didn't step back. I didn't tell him to go inside. I just stood there, looking at him, feeling that tension stretch tighter and tighter between us until it felt like it was going to break. And then I was the one who closed the distance. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some impulsive, reckless move. It was deliberate. That's the part I have the hardest time living with, because I knew exactly what I was doing. Ryan didn't move at first, like he was giving me one last chance to stop, one last second to change my mind. But I didn't. And when his hand finally found mine, it felt like something inside me clicked into place in a way that made everything else fade out. The guilt didn't hit right away, neither did the panic. It was just this intense, overwhelming awareness of the moment, of the fact that I had stepped across a line I couldn't pretend didn't exist anymore. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew Ethan was still inside, that he knew, that he was part of this, somehow. That thought should have stopped me. It didn't. What followed felt like a blur and a slow-motion crash at the same time. Every second stretched out, heavy with meaning, with consequence, with something I didn't fully understand until it was too late. At some point, we went back inside. That's the part that still messes with me the most. Because it wasn't hidden. It wasn't something we tried to sneak past him. When I walked back into that living room, Ryan just behind me, the noise didn't stop. The music was still playing, the others were still talking, laughing, but there was a shift, subtle but there, like they felt it, like they knew. And Ethan, he was sitting on the couch, exactly where I'd left him, watching. Our eyes met immediately, like they were always going to. I was waiting for something, anger, shock, anything that would make this feel real in a way I could push against. But there was nothing like that in his expression, just that same calm, steady look, and something else, something darker. Approval. My chest tightened, a wave of emotion hitting me all at once. Confusion, disbelief, something dangerously close to resentment. How long? I asked, my voice cutting through the room more sharply than I intended. The conversations around us didn't fully stop, but they quieted, just enough. Ethan tilted his head slightly. How long what? How long have you been thinking about this? I pressed. About whatever this is. He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I felt every pair of eyes in the room shift, focus, settle. On me, on us. Long enough, he said finally. That wasn't good enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it, trying to find something solid to grab onto. You just decided this was okay? I didn't decide anything for you, he said. But you didn't stop it. No, he admitted. Why? That question felt bigger than everything else, heavier, because I needed to understand, and I wasn't sure I was going to like the answer. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, his eyes still locked on mine, because I wanted to see what you would do. That hit harder than anything else he'd said. You turned me into a test? I asked, my voice dropping. It's not a test, he said. It's just reality. You can't fake something like this. You either feel it or you don't. And if I didn't, I shot back, then nothing would have happened. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's your defense? It's not a defense, he said. It's the truth. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls were closing in. And what if I did feel it? I asked, my voice quieter now. What then? Ethan held my gaze, unflinching. Then we stopped pretending things are the same as they used to be. That answer settled into me in a way I couldn't ignore, because it wasn't just about tonight. It wasn't just about Ryan or the others, or the tension that had been building. It was about us, about something in our marriage that had already changed long before any of this happened. You should have talked to me, I said, the words coming out softer now. Instead of this. Would you have listened? He asked.
I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Because I didn't know. Maybe I would have dismissed it. Maybe I would have shut it down before it even had a chance to become real. And maybe that's exactly why he didn't. That realization sat heavy in my chest. Around us, the room felt different now. The energy had shifted completely. There was no pretending this was just another casual night anymore. Marcus stood near the kitchen, his posture tense, but his eyes locked on me. Nate looked unsure, like he wasn't entirely comfortable with where this had gone. Cole, on the other hand, had that same unreadable expression Ethan had been wearing all night. Watching. Waiting. It hit me then, all at once. This wasn't just something between me and Ethan, or me and Ryan. This was something bigger. Something that had been building, quietly, over time. And I had just stepped right into the center of it. I don't know what happens next, I admitted, more to myself than to anyone else. Ethan leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable again. That's up to you. That answer again, always pushing it back to me, like he was determined to remove himself from responsibility, even though this entire situation had his fingerprints all over it. I looked around the room, at the faces that suddenly felt too close, too aware, too involved. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt something cut through everything else. Clarity. Not the kind that makes things easier, the kind that makes things undeniable. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't something I could neatly compartmentalize and pretend never happened. This was a shift, a fracture, something that had already changed the foundation of my marriage in a way that couldn't be undone. And standing there, in that moment, I realized something else. Ethan hadn't just been watching me. He'd been watching all of them too, waiting to see who would step forward, waiting to see who I would choose. And somehow, that realization felt even worse than everything else, because it meant this wasn't just about curiosity. It was about control in a way that didn't look like control at all. I looked back at him, really looked at him, like I was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said. He didn't deny it. That was all the confirmation I needed. And in that moment, something inside me shifted again, not toward him, away. I didn't say anything else. I didn't argue. I didn't try to fix it or understand it any further. I just turned, walked past everyone, and headed for the front door. No one stopped me. Not Ethan, not Ryan, not any of them. The cool night air hit me again as I stepped outside, but it didn't feel the same as before. Before, it had been an escape. Now, it felt like the beginning of something else, something uncertain, something I wasn't ready to name yet. But one thing was clear. Whatever we had before that night, it was gone. And there was no going back.